Now, the classic line in those two verses, we skipped right over it. It's at the end of verse 20. But the classic line is at the end of verse 20. So let's back up. After he struck down Moabite's two mightiest warriors, he also went down into a pit on a snowy day and killed a lion. Benaiah. After he struck down Moab's two mightiest warriors. Now here's the wordplay in verse 20. The word used to describe the two warriors is very close to the expression that they are lion-like. And so some translators have said, no. They are lion-like. And if you read in the King James Version, it will actually say, these were lion-like men. Two lion-like men. Benaiah takes them on, and then the very next line, and then he ends up in a pit on a snowy day with an actual lion. That's where Benaiah gets his fame. He was in a pit with a lion on a snowy day. Come on. In a pit, alone. God has somehow put on Benaiah, listen, man, I need you to stand up for me, but you're going to have to fight a lot of your battles by just taking personal ownership and responsibility. Oh, it's so much easier to go with an army and be the commander in the back, just telling all the foot soldiers. But Benaiah, although he was that, God had called him to take a stand alone. And that's where Benaiah is noted for his courage. Not any of the battles that he wins with an army. But what the Bible mentions about Benaiah is his courage when he had to stand alone in a pit. We know another Old Testament Bible character that ended up in a pit with lions. This is just as unlikely. Benaiah is just as much an underdog as was Daniel in the den. But it's worse, some would say. His hands must have been cold and numb. In order to hold or to use them must have hurt as he struggled just to keep their feeling. He's out there in the snow. Do you hear the description? He's in a pit. There's only one of them coming out of this thing. He can't run. He's face to face with this thing. He can't get out. Only one of them's getting out. And it's snowing. It's cold. His hands are numb. And he has to take on the lion alone. And that's exactly what verse 22 of 2 Samuel. Chronicles also accounts his story, but 2 Samuel chapter 23 and verse 22, it says, such were the exploits of Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. He too was as famous as the three mighty warriors. These were his exploits. He was called to take these on alone. Sure, he's got stories about how the army was able to be strong and courageous. But Benaiah was known not for his group initiatives, but for his courage to stand alone. And then some lines that some of us have memorized begin to trickle to the front. The greatest want of the world is the want of men, the want of women who will stand alone, will have the courage to stand alone. Let me read for you lines that were read to me years and years ago, and I have never gotten them out of my mind while I have never preached on these words. But they come from the book Selected Messages, the first volume. Question: are we waiting for some compelling power to come upon the church before we shall arouse? Are we waiting for a group activity, a group initiative? Are we hoping to see the whole church revived? Are we hoping that there's a collective movement that we can join? That time will never come. Will there be a faithful remnant? Yes. But if we stand waiting for our school, our church, or even our family to get on board and to become as passionate or as courageous to stand for the right as we are, that time will never come. Benaiah took personal responsibility. He felt and knew that he was called by God in those circumstances, that he must stand while there was no one else there. He had to stand alone. He was to respond and to take ownership of God's purpose for his life. He wasn't to back down from a challenge, although it meant he did it alone.